This should be a video about the first ever French world champion. This should be a video about one of the fiercest teammate rivalries in the history of Formula 1.
Good turn. Out of the slipstream. Villeneuve coming down the inside, and Pironi is not having it. Pironi just moves across on Villeneuve. He says, "This is my race, I'm going to lead it."
This should be a video about Ferrari's return to championship glory in the 1980s. But it's not. This is Didier Pironi, the man who should have been 1982 Formula 1 world champion. A lot of the research for this video came from didierpironi.net and the David Sedgwick book, Pironi, the Champion That Never Was. Link in the description for both. Our story begins in Paris in the early 1950s with Louis José Dolhem. He had always wanted to race cars, but had to settle for bikes due to his lack of money. He had been part of the French resistance during World War II and had even been captured by the Nazis when he was sent to a concentration camp before escaping on a bike whilst disguised as a Nazi. Near the end of the war, he would meet Ilva Weffert, the daughter of a successful businessman who owned a high-profile building company in Paris. They would get married and have a son called José. After 8 years, he would have another son, but this time not with Ilva. Instead, it was with her younger sister, Imelda. That baby would be born on the 26th of March 1952. And as the family were very well known in Paris, they had to try and avoid the scandal getting out, so a surrogate father was found for the baby boy. The surrogate father would be Valdi Pironi, and the baby would be named Didier Joseph Louis Pironi. And the family secret would stay a secret, even for Didier, who would not find out who his real father was until he was halfway through his 20s. Despite family drama, they did manage one of the largest construction companies in Paris, which afforded Didier a very privileged lifestyle. Pironi was obsessed with cars from a young age and would often be seen sat behind the wheels of his family's trucks with his legs not long enough to touch the pedals. At 14 years old, Didier would jump into his friend's Formula 3 car and drive it through the streets of Paris before being brought home by the police. He would also drive his Vespa around the city and also be brought home by the police. At the age of 16, he would get his pilot's license, becoming France's youngest ever registered pilot at that time. So the adrenaline junkie was always there, and at the age of 20 he would finally get the chance to race as he entered the 1972 Pilot Elf, which was a part driver school, part racing competition ran from the Winfield Racing School. Alongside time trials, there was also a panel of judges whose job it was to steward the races and then confirm the results. The panel for that year included reigning Formula 1 world champion Jackie Stewart and Tyrrell team principal Ken Tyrrell. Whilst competing in this, Pironi would have a very strange encounter that he would later tell to an interviewer. The night before the final competition, a mage appeared to him and told him he would win the competition and he would go on to have a great Formula 1 career. But he would never win the world championship, and one day he would die during a competition in a fire. The next day, Didier Pironi won the Pilot Elf. 1973 would be an important year for Pironi. Not only would he meet Catherine Gaux, who had a brief romantic relationship with Didier, but he would also enter the Formula Renault Championship, where he would ultimately finish 6th. For the next season, Pironi decided drastic action was needed, and he was going to take it. Pironi set up a meeting with Francois Goutier, the head of competition at Elf. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss Didier setting up his own team to compete in Formula Renault in 1974. Francois would agree to this and gave him a budget of 300,000 francs on one condition: Pironi must become Formula Renault champion. Pironi set out and bought an old butcher's shop in Manicourt, which would become the headquarters for his new team, and 9 months later, Team Pironi had fulfilled their objective, and Didier Pironi was Formula Renault champion. In 1975, Pironi would move to Formula Renault Europe, and he would also take part in the mandatory national service, where he would be placed into Le Bataillon de Joinville, which was a battalion devised to hold the future sporting stars of France. Other notable names of this battalion over the years include Michel Platini, Eric Cantona, and Zinedine Zidane. Pironi would finish third in Formula Renault Europe in 1975, the title that year going to fellow Frenchman René Arnoux, and Pironi would enter his second season in the competition in 1976, and this would be his make or break year, with his eyes firmly set on Formula 2. Pironi would be absolutely dominant, winning 8 races in a row, and 12 wins in a total of 16 races. Pironi would take the title and move to Formula 2, but not before getting his first taste of the 24 Hours of Le Mans, where he and the Kramer Racing team would finish 19th after clutch problems. Meanwhile, the worst kept secret in Formula 1 at the time was that Renault would be entering the sport as a constructor for the first time at some point during the 1977 season, meaning there was going to be 2 French teams on the grid as Renault would join Ligier. This meant there was more opportunities for young French drivers to join the sport, and France, thanks to the backing of companies like Elf, were on the precipice of their greatest generation of motorsport talent ever. In a few years' time, France would have Alain Prost, René Arnoux, Jacques Lafitte, Didier Pironi, Patrick Tambay, Jean-Pierre Jabouille, and Patrick Depailler competing in Formula 1 all at the same time. Just to put that into context as to how big those names are in French Formula 1 history, the British equivalent would be if Lewis Hamilton, Nigel Mansell, Jackie Stewart, Jim Clark, Damon Hill, Stirling Moss, and Jenson Button all competed at the same time. So there was a lot of pressure and a lot of competition for French drivers in 1977, and Pironi would enter Formula 2 with his teammate being René Arnoux. Pironi would have to play the number 2 role to the more experienced Arnoux, who was in his 3rd year of Formula 2. Mix this in with reliability issues for Pironi, who retired from his first 3 races in a row, and by the 5th race of the year, Pironi felt like he wasn't being showcased to the level that he wanted to. So he decided to take a risk, and whilst competing in Formula 2, he entered himself into the Monaco Formula 3 race. At that time, Formula 2 did not go to Monaco, and the Formula 3 Monaco race historically had been a race where young drivers would showcase their ability and try and get the eyes of the Formula 1 teams. Previous winners had been Stirling Moss, Jackie Stewart, Ronnie Peterson, Patrick Depailler, Jacques Lafitte and Tom Price. Pironi would qualify 2nd for that race. Other big names such as Nelson Piquet, Tiff Needell and Derek Warwick would all fail to qualify. Pironi would take the lead at the start of the race, and that's where he would stay until the end, winning the Monaco F3 with ease. Back in Formula 2, René Arnoux would win the title and Pironi would have to settle for 3rd, but a meeting with Jackie Stewart would prove vital for his future, as the now retired Scotsman told Pironi not to make any decisions on his future without first consulting him. Stewart's former team Tyrrell were looking for a new driver after Ronnie Peterson had left them to rejoin Lotus, and Stewart was able to put in a good word with Ken Tyrrell, who would offer Pironi a 2-year contract to join Formula 1 in 1978. Pironi's debut would be an uninspired one, just qualifying for the race starting in 23rd place, whilst his more experienced teammate Patrick Depailler would qualify 10th. Depailler would finish the race on the podium in 3rd, whilst Pironi had to settle for 14th. The next race in Brazil would be far better for Pironi, where despite another disappointing qualifying in 19th, he was able to convert it to 6th, which at the time gave out 1 point. He would get points at 3 of the next 4 races, and after the Monaco Grand Prix he would find himself a respectable 8th in the championship. But this was nothing in comparison to what his teammate was achieving at the time. Depailler had been on the podium in 3 of the first 4 races, and in Monaco would take not only his first ever win, but also the championship lead. After the Monaco Grand Prix, it would go downhill for both Tyrrell drivers. Thanks to a mix of the Tyrrell team not being able to keep up with the upgrade rate of teams such as Lotus, Ferrari and Brabham, and a bad run of reliability, both Tyrrell drivers would fall down the championship order. But F1 would not be the only competition that Pironi would enter during 1978, as he would enter the 24 Hours of Le Mans for the 3rd year in a row. After his 19th place finish in 1976 and a DNF in 1977, it could only get better in 1978. Pironi would be in the number 2 car alongside Jean-Pierre Jassou, who was far more experienced than Didier, given he was 15 years older, and this would be his 8th time competing at Le Mans, previously finishing 3rd 3 times. And he had also won the Monaco Formula 3 race, 11 years before Pironi had. The car they would be driving was the Renault Alpine A442, which had been ran 5 times over the previous 2 24 Hours of Le Mans, 1 entry in 1976 and 4 entries in 1977. Out of the 5 entries, they had DNF'd 5 times. Some changes had been made to the car for 1978, now called the Renault Alpine A442B, which was only ran by Pironi and Jassou. Most notable was the acrylic glass bubble that now covered the cockpit. This was to aid aerodynamics and was said to give the car an extra 5 miles per hour on the long straights of Le Mans. The downside of this was it made the car incredibly claustrophobic, with Patrick Depailler and Jean-Pierre Jambouille refusing to race with it, so it was just Pironi and Jassou who had it on their car. Another side effect of the bubble was that during the race, not only the heat from the sun, but also the heat from the engine was trapped within the bubble, and with the drivers being in the car for long stretches of time, this would lead to them getting very dehydrated. The drivers would also comment later that during the driver changes, it would feel like they were entering a bath of sweat, and it's estimated that both drivers lost around 8 kilograms of weight during the race. During one of these changes, Didier had painful muscle spasms. The doctors of the team diagnosed him with an infection that could have come from an open wound or a bite, and Pironi had to have a tetanus jab before getting back in the car. With 4 hours to go of the 24-hour race, the Renault was now in the lead due to reliability issues for some of its competitors, and Pironi got in the car for his final 2-hour stint. But as Jean-Pierre got out of the car, he told the team that he'd heard the gearbox crackling, and in order to try and avoid reliability issues, Renault elected not to stop again and have Didier drive all of the final 4 hours instead of just the 2. It took all of his strength to finish the race, but he did finish, and finish in the lead. After the race, Pironi would need help to get out of the car, and once out of the car he would collapse onto the floor where he would receive medical attention, and then be able to join his co-pilot on the podium before collapsing again and ending up in the hospital. After the Le Mans win, Renault pulled out of sports car racing, leaving at the top, and went all out on their Formula 1 team. They now desperately wanted Pironi to join them. But Pironi still had a year left on his Tyrrell contract, so that's where he stayed for 1979, and Renault would give the second seat to René Arnoux. Back in Formula 1, Pironi would enter his second year with Tyrrell, where his previous teammate, Patrick Depailler, had left the team to join Ligier and would be replaced at Tyrrell by Jean-Pierre Jarier, who was entering his 8th season of Formula 1. In the first race of the season, Pironi would get caught up in a lap 1 crash, and in the next race, Pironi would step on the podium for the first time, benefiting from a Carlos Reutemann penalty. That penalty would later be rescinded, and Pironi's first podium was taken away. But he wouldn't have to wait long to have a proper one, as 4 races later in Belgium he finished 3rd, and even got to keep the podium this time. At the end of the year, both Pironi and Jarier finished on 14 points, and both had 2 podiums, but feeling like he'd achieved all he could at Tyrrell, Pironi looked to move, and for 1980 he would join Ligier. Pironi's former teammate Patrick Depailler had joined Ligier in 1979, but after breaking both his legs in a hang gliding incident, he'd been dropped by the team mid-season for former Ferrari man Jackie Ickx. But he was not what Ligier were looking for long term, so Pironi was offered the opportunity to take the step up to drive for the team who had finished third in the constructors' standings in the previous year and taken 4 wins. Pironi would qualify third for the first race of the year in Argentina, but would have to retire with engine issues. He would also get his first front row in Brazil, but with a temperamental car, Pironi had to pit to make adjustments to the car's skirts, and despite coming out of the pits in 21st place, he was able to fight back to an impressive 4th.
37-year-old Jean-Pierre Jabouille going magnificently, and so there is Didier Pironi in the Ligier, and that is number 25, because he came out of the pits in 15th position, and he's now coming right up through the field. You've just seen him take Keke Rosberg in the Fittipaldi, and he's closing up to be in the first half dozen. He's just taken Jochen Maas in the new A3 Arrows, and he's within sight now of Riccardo Patrese in the other Arrows, who is in 6th place, and that's an incredible drive by Pironi, who's really showing class this season. He's changed his allegiance from Tyrrell to Ligier. He loves the car, and he's certainly driving it superb.
One man who was very impressed watching this was in Maranello. Enzo Ferrari reportedly shouted, "I want Pironi," and within a few months it was settled that Pironi would be wearing red in 1981. At the next race in South Africa, he would qualify 5th and finish 3rd to complete the first ever all-French podium, and the first single nation podium in 12 years, with René Arnoux from Renault winning and Ligier teammate Jacques Laffite in 2nd place. 2 races later, at his 36th Grand Prix, Pironi would take his first win in dominant style, 47 seconds ahead of 2nd place Alan Jones.
That is Essex Lotus.
Yeah, Pironi's really driven a beautiful race, because he's now within a couple of laps of his first Grand Prix win, and only his car can stop him now. And he drove the first half of the race under the most difficult sort of pressure. He had Jones just with him, but he was always able to get away a little bit, but he had to do it in the 3/10 of a second a lap. He didn't have a clear superiority, and he's really had to work hard for this win. From half distance onwards, it's been relatively easy for him. I think Jones is in a little bit of trouble with his car. He's dropped back steadily, but he really worked hard in the early stage, and he didn't make any mistakes, and apart from a little bit of excitement for a patch with the back marks in the middle, he handled everything very well indeed.
And just to emphasise how well Didier Pironi, the second of these 2 cars that we're looking at, is driving, I tell you that the car that is in front of him is Carlos Reutemann, who is in 3rd position. We're looking at Pironi now. So Pironi, with 3 laps to go, has lapped everybody up to 3rd place.
And he would follow this up at the next race in Monaco with pole position, and would again lead in dominant style until making a mistake, clipping the barrier with 22 laps to go.
Lap 55, and there, stopping, it's Pironi. Pironi stopping, and Reutemann closing right up on him. Pironi must have spun, and Reutemann is through, and Pironi looks as though he's out. That's Laffite, it's Laffite. Laffite has broken his tyre, broken his suspension. That's the leader, that is Didier Pironi, and he's out of the race. Didier Pironi has been fated not to win the Monaco Grand Prix, and now Carlos Reutemann on lap 55 out of 76 has gone into the lead.
It's been trying to spot with rain for about 10 laps now, Murray. I suspect that he got on a bit of a wet patch. It's a mistake. It's a clear-cut mistake by Pironi. He's damaged his car, and I would think that the slippery track had something to do with that.
He would get a podium at his home race in France in the next race, and it was an all-Ligier front row for the British Grand Prix. But this would also not result in a win, as Laffite spun after a puncture, and Pironi had 2 punctures during that race.
The leader's coming to sight now, and that is Laffite, having just taken over from Pironi. I suspect Pironi must be in some sort of trouble. Now maybe it's tyre trouble. Pironi's slowed right down. He's got some sort of mechanical bother there. Yes, he's got a wheel loose.
And it looks like the same trouble that he had in Spain. If you remember, a wheel nut came off in Spain, and Didier Pironi's car was jinking in Spain, just as it is doing here. It's a tyre, it's a front tyre. The left front tyre has been punctured, and Didier Pironi has lost the lead to Laffite, and is soon going to lose second and third places.
Here we have another problem. It looks like Didier Pironi once again it looks like he's got another puncture. He's pulling off of the racetrack. He of course had been into the pits earlier for a very long pit stop, again for tyre trouble. Ironically, he, it seems, had picked up a puncture the last time. This time it is the end of the day. He's taking his gloves off. I'm afraid he's going to be closing the office for the day.
After the British Grand Prix, Pironi was 14 points off championship leader Alan Jones. And thanks to a mix of his own mistakes and reliability, Pironi had missed out on points 3 times. One of those times starting from third and 2 of them from pole. So Didier did consider himself a title contender at this time, but the dream of the 1980 World Championship would come crashing down very quickly over the next 3 races. A transmission issue whilst 5th in the German Grand Prix, a handling issue whilst 4th in the Austrian Grand Prix, and a collision at the Dutch Grand Prix saw him finish pointless for 4 races in a row. Pironi would go from 3rd in the championship to now being 6th, 24 points off Jones, with 3 races to go, and in a world where it was only 9 points for a win, it was still possible, but a monumental mountain to climb. Pironi would get his first points finish in over 2 months by finishing 6th at the Italian Grand Prix, and then he would get back-to-back podiums at the final 2 races of the year. It wouldn't be enough to get back into the title picture, but it was a strong finish to the year, and it would be good for his confidence, as for 1981 he would make the biggest move of his career, becoming a Ferrari driver. Ferrari had been one of the most dominant teams of the 1970s, with 3 Drivers' World Championships, 2 for Niki Lauda and 1 for Jody Scheckter, as well as 4 Constructors' Championships, and they had featured in the top 3 of the Constructors in 8 of the 10 years. But thus far, the 1980s had not gone the way of Ferrari. They had a very talented lineup, reigning world champion Jody Scheckter and Gilles Villeneuve. But the advancement of the ground effect based cars massively caught Ferrari off guard in 1980 and saw them drop from champions to 10th in the Constructors in just 12 months. Ferrari's lowest ever Constructors finishing position. Scheckter would secure points only once all year as world champion, and he would retire at the end of the season, whereas Villeneuve would score 4 times and finish the year on just 16 points. Didier would enter the team and got on really well with Gilles as a teammate at the start of their relationship. When Pironi was asked why he thought they had such a good relationship, Didier replied, "We are just as crazy as each other." It was now beginning to look like the first ever French world champion was going to be crowned sooner rather than later. In the races, qualifying would be an issue again for Pironi, especially at the second race of the year, where Pironi was out-qualified by Villeneuve by over a second, although the race would end with both of them not finishing. It wouldn't be until the 4th race of the year at Imola that Ferrari would score any points, with Pironi finishing 5th and getting 2 points for the Scuderia. Although even then it was very easy to argue that he wasn't the strongest Ferrari driver, as in a wet race whilst leading, Villeneuve made the choice to go to dry tyres, and a mix of a very slow stop and calling it a bit too early saw Villeneuve plummet down the leaderboard. This was followed by a second pit stop to go back on the wets, and Villeneuve was out of contention for the points. Pironi would also lead a lot of that race, but was unable to hold off the likes of Piquet, Patrese and Reutemann.
Closer and closer, and he's making his challenge. Piquet is challenging, and he's through.
Villeneuve would get his first points at the next race in Belgium, while Pironi would be pointless despite starting 3rd. And then in Monaco, in an incredible race, Villeneuve would win for Ferrari, taking Ferrari's first win since Villeneuve stood at the top step of the podium at the final race of the 1979 season.
Superior car in terms of braking or engine power, but Jones must be in some sort of trouble to have allowed Villeneuve to close up on him as much as he has, and Villeneuve goes through! Fantastic! Gilles Villeneuve leads! Lap 73, Gilles Villeneuve has blasted past Alan Jones, whose car is very definitely in trouble. Yet another nouveau leader, the third of the race. First it was Piquet, then it was Jones, and now it is Villeneuve. Magnificent! And Ferrari is really back in the hunt. Victory for Villeneuve. A superb achievement. There is the hero of the day, Gilles Villeneuve, who has driven a magnificent race, and in their first season with this new turbocharged car, Ferrari have won a Grand Prix. Oh, the champagne, the traditional champagne for Gilles Villeneuve.
He would follow this up at the next race in Spain with another win in what many say is his greatest ever drive. F1 journalist David Tremaine described his victory saying it was a virtuoso display of defensive and tactical driving, and of course coolness under the most intense pressure, from the man with the purest racing spirit of all of them. None but he could have coaxed such a performance out of that unloved mount. It is arguably the greatest drive of the 1980s.
But now Villeneuve then got put his foot down, and Villeneuve in the Ferrari wins from Lafitte, Watson, Reutemann and De Angelis. The Spanish crowd justifiably goes mad.
What a magnificent race, and I have to say that was an absolutely marvellous drive by Gilles Villeneuve. He was not in the fastest car by any manner of means. He got into the lead by virtue of qualifying a difficult car to drive very, very well indeed. He extracted every ounce of performance that he could from the car, and he then got it, grabbed his chance, and he was getting into the lead at the beginning of the race. His tyres were good, and he drove a fabulous race, controlling it with no mistake.
So in one of the most exciting Grand Prix I have ever seen, with a second successive victory for Gilles Villeneuve, a magnificent victory in the Ferrari.
At this point, Villeneuve is 4th in the championship with 21 points, whereas Pironi found himself 8th on only 5, and yet to see the podium this season, and it would stay that way. Villeneuve would be on the podium one more time at his home race in Canada, but Pironi would not be on the podium all year, and would finish the season in 13th, with 9 points, to 25 points for Villeneuve in 7th. During the off-season, there was negotiations between Pironi and McLaren and Williams, but he would decide to stay at Ferrari. He would also say in an interview that he very much modelled himself on James Hunt, and said he would be finished in Formula 1 within 3 years. 1981 had definitely been a step in the right direction for Ferrari. They had gone from the lows of 10th in the championship to a more respectable 5th. But if 1981 had been a step in the right direction, then 1982 would be a huge leap forward, as the car was quick from the get-go. But as the drivers arrived in South Africa, it appeared that no racing was going to be taking place that weekend. Over the off-season, new clauses had been discreetly added to the drivers' super licenses. These clauses stated that their contracts would now be negotiated in between teams, and the driver was not to be involved. So like in football, the teams could decide to buy and sell drivers between themselves. So for example, if Williams wanted Pironi to drive for them, they would have to make a deal with Ferrari to buy him, and Pironi would have no say in it. Another clause that had been added stated that it was now illegal for any drivers to express any negative opinion against F1 or any of its management. The first to notice this was Niki Lauda, who instantly contacted Pironi, as he was the head of the Grand Prix Drivers Association at that time, and they decided to orchestrate a strike and got all of the drivers to refuse to drive. Well, nearly all the drivers. Jock and Mass arrived late to the track and had missed all of this and just wondered where everyone had gone. The drivers barricaded themselves inside the ballroom of the Johannesburg Sunnyside Park Hotel. Pironi would serve as the main negotiator for the side of the drivers during the strike. FISA, who were the international sport governing body at that time, stated that unless the drivers returned to the track, they would all be banned for life. Despite this, the drivers stayed strong. To keep spirits strong, many drivers showed off their secret talents. Bruno Giacomelli showed the other drivers how to dismantle an AK-47. Gilles Villeneuve played the piano. and they were able to witness a stand-up comedy set from Niki Lauda. The next day, Pironi told the drivers that they had won and their demands had been met and they were able to get racing and start the 1982 season. Following the race, FISA fined all the drivers and went back on their word, stating no agreement had been made. The GPDA was disbanded and in its place the Professional Racing Drivers Association was formed, with Pironi and Lauda at its head, and promised to fight back and also campaign for track safety for all of the drivers. Once again, Pironi would get the first points for Ferrari of the season, this time around at the Brazilian Grand Prix, finishing 6th and getting 1 point, and a few weeks later he would get married. The San Marino Grand Prix of 1982 will go down as one of the most controversial races in Formula 1 history, but even before that weekend began, it was surrounded by controversy. A couple of weeks previous, Villeneuve had finished 3rd at the USA West Grand Prix, but later had been disqualified, as Tyrrell had protested the Ferrari's rear wing, and it was found to be illegal, meaning that Villeneuve went into the race weekend still yet to score a single point, whereas Pironi was on 1. The Ferrari duo was not living up to what they had expected that year thus far, but Imola was a chance to change all of that. 2 races previously at the Brazilian Grand Prix, Piquet's Brabham and Rosberg's Williams had been disqualified from the race due to them using water tanks as ballast. In an act of solidarity, all Formula 1 Constructor Association affiliated teams would boycott the San Marino Grand Prix, meaning no Brabham, McLaren, Lotus or Williams, which meant that it would really be a 2-horse race between the Ferraris and the Renaults. Before the race, Pironi and Villeneuve of Ferrari met with Prost and Arnoux of Renault, and they reached an agreement. They all knew the race would revolve around fuel consumption, so they agreed they would all go easy on each other for the first half of the race, and then the second half would be all out for the win. On the Saturday, Renault would take first blood, locking out the front row with Arnoux on pole and Prost in second. Villeneuve would be third and Pironi a distant fourth, who was only just able to set a lap time after his car was rebuilt after a suspension failure during the morning practice. From the start, Prost had engine issues, and both Ferraris were able to pass him and chase Arnoux for the lead.
Down round the Rettifilio, the 2 Ferraris right up behind the second Renault. Out, Brian Hinton has had trouble in the Tyrrell getting away from the line, and one of the Ferraris is now pulling up and up into second place, and it's Villeneuve. And in 4th position, it is Didier Pironi. Michele Alboreto is in 5th place, and it is René Arnoux, the pole position man, through the Aqua Minerale bends, chased by Gilles Villeneuve in 2nd position. In 3rd place, the second Ferrari, Didier Pironi. Then there is Alain Prost in 5th
On lap
position.
22, Pironi would get past Villeneuve and start his own charge after Arnoux, but Villeneuve would take the place back just 4 laps later.
The Renault gets that little bit of power down that little bit earlier and just gets out of that corner, but Villeneuve is having a go, and I think Villeneuve is probably going to pass his teammate Pironi. Pironi's finally spotted him, completely side by side, and Villeneuve will have the inside line as they come into the hairpin, but...
And they hang on together. That was at a speed of some 180 miles an hour. Villeneuve is through into 2nd place again. He has regained his 2nd place on.
And a lap after that, he was in the lead.
Out here, but Arnoux seems to be moving to the left to protect the line into the next corner. There he goes. Yes, he did. That has always been his spot where he's performed best. So Villeneuve takes the lead. Now let's Pironi's having a little go as well.
Lap 30, the halfway point, and it was foot to the floor for all 3 drivers, as Arnoux took back the lead in a fantastic freeway battle.
I know he's right up there, and we could see a 3-way braking match down at the end of the straight. You see, there goes Arnoux. He is quicker on the straight, and he's got Villeneuve. And so has Pironi, possibly.
Well, almost
goodness
in.
gracious me.
almost in line abreast, and we had two changes there. Arnoux through to the lead, Pironi through to second.
This is great stuff, great dicing. Pironi jolly nearly did both of them. He was within a whisker, but he's now lost second place again. Poor old Pironi. Every time he does anything positive, it seems to just sort of go straight back at him.
And this gets now. Arnoux is held back, and he's got the two Ferraris right behind him.
But they're having a go, but it lets Pironi get right behind the Renault, and we're going to have a three-way fight down the other end of the straight with a bit of luck once more.
Sacré bleu, nom de Dieu, I can hear Arnoux say metaphorically, will you get out of my way? Salazar, actually, it's Salazar.
Yes, because I tell you what, Villeneuve is perfectly placed as well. He's getting the toe.
And
there's pushing and shoving. He's putting him on the grass. And Arnoux blocking it all up.
Zap, 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 they go past. And as one, the Renault and the two Ferraris take the Chilean.
Reasonably well placed, so we're going to get a change of second place here by the look of things. Yes, he's also got the right side of the track to attack the corner, but Pironi's fighting back. There's certainly no team tactics driving here. They're both going at it hammer and tongs. And
on lap 44, though, Arnoux' engine would give out, as Prost's had 38 laps previously. And it was now Ferrari versus Ferrari for the win.
Because the gap is far less than it was between the second, and there's that puff of smoke again.
A bit more than before, I thought, coming out of the Renault there. So we'll keep that one monitored. We'll have a look at that. But I didn't see as big a one before. Did you, Murray?
No, I did not. I've noticed it for some time, but it was much more significant there, and it is much more. There he goes again. Watch the Renault, everybody, very carefully. Watch the back of the car, and Villeneuve is going to go through and take the lead here, I believe.
Yes, I think Renault's in trouble. He seems to have slowed down. He's not producing the power. Turbo's blown up now. That's a very spectacular sight, but that is goodbye, René Arnoux. Don't set the poor Ferrari on fire. What a great shame. What a terrific race Arnoux driven, but I'm afraid that is the end of that for him. So we're going to have to see how well the two Ferraris can fight each other. And, healthy little blaze there. You think he's going
exactly sorry, James. Exactly the same thing happened in practice.
Pironi would take the lead from his Canadian teammates after he made a mistake.
And Villeneuve made a mistake. He just went wide, lost traction, and Pironi nipped through. Just a little mistake from Villeneuve, and that's what it's cost him. It's cost him the lead. Now let's see if he can fight back.
Villeneuve would take back the lead on lap 49, but Pironi would take the lead back again on lap 51, and it was an all-out battle.
190 miles an hour on this up to the Reticilio.
Yeah, Villeneuve's well placed now. He's picking up the draft well. He's going to be alongside. Which side's Pironi going to keep? Pironi, I think, has made him go the way he shouldn't have done. The long way around, Villeneuve's inside. Ooh! Absolutely side by side, but Villeneuve's got the line up the hill into the next corner.
And look at the ATS right in the line of both of them, and Villeneuve takes his opportunity, comes out to the left, and it could be that Pironi's going to be balked, and they go through absolutely together, and Villeneuve leads again. Another change in the lead, and is on lap 49, and the French-Canadian has put one across Pironi, and I think we have to put some of the blame there onto the ATS, because he certainly didn't make it at all easy for either of the two Ferrari drivers, but how brilliantly Gilles Villeneuve took his opportunity on lap 49.
From the pits, the Ferrari pit board read slow. Villeneuve believed this to mean that they were to hold position and bring it home. Pironi would see this differently, as he believed this meant they were still free to race, but not to push the engine.
Machinery, we could still, and look at that, Pironi and Villeneuve absolutely together.
Pironi's in the lead. Pironi's just nipped through. Unfortunately, the director was away, but Villeneuve is going to respond here, possibly. So I would suspect that what happened, that was on the straight, I would suspect that Villeneuve made a bit of a mistake coming out of the complex before the pits, came out a bit slowly, and Pironi had the chance to pick it up. So we've definitely got a fight, because I don't think Villeneuve's the sort of man to take much notice of the slow signals from the pit, and I would think that he'll desperately want to fight back. He'll be mindful of championship points and all the other implications.
On the penultimate lap, Villeneuve would take the lead back.
Yeah, he's well placed now. He's right behind him, and he's going to get by on the straight, but can Pironi defend his situation down to the corner. They're going to arrive together with Villeneuve with just the advantage. He's going to be a little bit in front.
And he's done it exactly as he did it before. He was on the outside on the right-hander, on the left side on the left-hander. That gave Villeneuve the advantage, which he has taken. And now he's keeping his foot stuck right in the car, rather the fuel injection. And now he's got to keep ahead of Pironi, not just for this lap, but the next lap as well. And my guess is that he will do just that, because Pironi has been second most of the time.
Yeah, what Pironi's going to have to do is to be very well placed as they come onto the long straight in that combination corners, those combination corners before the pit. He's fighting well, he's well placed now, he's just got to hold that position, not get any further behind Villeneuve, but he's dropped back a bit. He's got to start within sort of 4 lengths of Villeneuve when they come onto the main straight past the pits. If he can do that, he'll get in on the straight.
And he's certainly going to be within 4 lengths. This is the last part of the last lap but one.
Yeah, the problem is, of course, being the car behind, he's further behind than that now, and of course he doesn't get quite the same amount of grip. Can he close right up? Can he get himself into position? He's not badly placed. If he can just get the power down nicely, he's all right. He's got a chance, but he didn't get the power on quite as he would have liked to, and he's not quite close enough to sling right past Villeneuve, but
This is lap 60, the last lap. We are around the Tamburello, and see Pironi now. He's going through.
Pironi's got to come down the inside. He's got it. Oh, he's going wide. Whoa! Fantastic stuff. They've changed places. It's on 2 laps running, and Pironi now, all he has to do now is keep it pointing the right way, and no mistakes, because there really isn't a passing place unless Villeneuve can have a go up here. There aren't really any more passing places on the lap, so it looks as if Pironi's done it.
The last of the late breakers, Pironi has shown himself to be with that masterly manoeuvre on the last lap in this San Marino Grand Prix. They're through the Acqua Minerale bends for the last time. The crowd is really cheering them home. Ferrari looks as though he's going to win. Ferrari looks as though he's going to be second. Look at the flags waving. It's a long, long time since Ferrari had the double, first and second. And it looks as though Gilles Villeneuve, as they come down underneath the bridge, down to the Rivazza for the last time, is going to have to give best to his teammate Didier Pironi, and that it's going to be a win for the Belgian, for the Frenchman for the second time in his career. But Villeneuve could still do it. He's going to try and go through on the inside. These are the closing stages. They're into the Traguardo now, and no, I don't think Villeneuve can possibly do it.
I tell you, Pironi nearly blew it. He made a mistake there, terrible, on that corner before the combination, and Villeneuve was nearly past. But there we go. Didier Pironi wins. Magnificent race, terrific entertainment.
At the end of the race, Villeneuve was furious and stormed to the Ferrari motorhome and initially refused to appear on the podium.
And there's no sign of Villeneuve on the victory jeep as it goes round. Pironi in the red overalls, Michele Alboreto with the dark hair and the green overalls, and Gilles Villeneuve has opted not to go round on the jeep at the end of the race. And I think he's probably gone back to the Ferrari pit for some stern words with teammate Mauro Forgieri. But what we've seen is a wonderful measure race between 2 top drivers deciding to keep racing all the way to the end. And as the crowd walk away from the San Marino Grand Prix, they must be indeed very happy to have seen a wonderful race put on by their favourite team, the prancing horse of Ferrari.
Villeneuve stated he would never speak with Pironi ever again, and he wasn't aware how true that would be. Two weeks later, at the Belgian Grand Prix, in the final moments of qualifying, Villeneuve was just under a tenth behind Pironi and set off on his final qualifying lap.
Gilles Villeneuve has died in hospital tonight after crashing at 170 miles an hour during the final qualifying session for the Belgian Grand Prix. 30-year-old Villeneuve, one of the most popular Formula One drivers, suffered severe neck and head injuries. His Ferrari teammates have now pulled out of the race, and fellow drivers are claiming current cars are excessively dangerous. Villeneuve, regarded as one of the quickest and most talented Grand Prix drivers, has never won the World Championship. Currently, he was lying 7th and pressing hard. He was just 8 minutes from the end of his qualifying session when the crash happened on one of the fastest sections of the Zolder circuit. It appears that Villeneuve's Ferrari clipped the back of Jochen Mass's March and somersaulted 150 yards through the air. As the car crashed back onto the track in pieces, Villeneuve was hurled into a safety fence. Other cars were immediately flagged down as the Canadian driver was given the kiss of life at the trackside. Within minutes he was on his way to hospital, but an emergency operation failed to save his life.
30-year-old French-Canadian Gilles Villeneuve made a sensational Grand Prix debut with McLaren in the 1977 British Grand Prix, after which he was contracted by Ferrari, for whom he was to drive in 65 Grand Prix, winning 6 of them and becoming the idol of the fanatical Italian motor racing tifosi. In 1978, his first year with Ferrari, Villeneuve established an immediate reputation as a tremendously competitive hard charger. In the last Grand Prix of the year, he achieved every racing driver's ambition, victory at home. Villeneuve wins, and 100,000 cheering Canadians go wild with delight at the first ever Grand Prix win by a Canadian in, of all places, Canada. 1979 was Villeneuve's best year. 3 wins, but none of them as hard fought as his battle with René Arnoux for second place in France. And Arnoux does it, does he? And Villeneuve locks up. And Villeneuve has had to go wide, and Arnoux on the inside as they go round Villeroy. He's got the shorter line. He's got second position. He's got second position. He's through. They bang wheels. He's off. He's off. And he's back again. René Arnoux off the circuit and back again, and now Villeneuve's in second position, and this is the last lap. And Villeneuve goes over the corrugations, and he nearly loses the front as they go up to Parabolique on the 80th and last lap. And he's back, he's in second position. Villeneuve is second in the Ferrari. Down to third position goes Arnoux. A perfect example of Villeneuve's gritty fighting spirit, which endeared him to motor racing enthusiasts. It was the same 2 months later in Holland, when, after contesting the lead for 36 laps against Alan Jones, he fought his punctured Ferrari back to the pits with unforgettable determination. 1980 was a barren year, but last year he won at Monaco, and with another fighting drive took his last Grand Prix victory in Spain. Now Villeneuve then got put his foot down, and Villeneuve in the Ferrari wins from Lafitte, Watson, Reutemann and De Angelis. The Spanish crowd justifiably goes mad. The last time that Gilles Villeneuve mounted the top step on the victory podium. In his tragically short career, Villeneuve spent 2 years in uncompetitive cars, fighting every foot of the way. But sometimes even his talent wasn't enough, as at last year's British Grand Prix. And off goes the Ferrari into the catch fencing goes De Cesaris. Alan Jones is off. So out of the race is Alan Jones, Villeneuve and De Cesaris. This year in an improved car, Villeneuve led in Brazil and finished third at Long Beach before being disqualified for a technicality. 2 weeks ago in the San Marino Grand Prix, he fought a bitter battle for victory. In his last ever race, Gilles Villeneuve, married with 2 children and one of the most exciting and talented drivers in the history of Grand Prix racing, just failed to win. Disenchanted with Ferrari, he was strongly tipped to drive for the British Williams team in 1983. But sadly, it was destined not to be.
Many people laid the reasons for Villeneuve's death at Pironi, who hid away from the public eye at this time, choosing not to attend the funeral as he thought his presence would cause more harm than good. Although he would later attend a memorial service at Monza, where the usually straight-faced Frenchman was seen breaking down in tears. Pironi and Ferrari would return to competition at Monaco, where despite running out of fuel on the last lap whilst leading, he would still be classified in second place.
Tunnel for the line. Is there Pironi stationary? It is! My goodness! The third leader in 2 laps.
He must have run out of petrol. There's a big problem for the Ferrari. yesterday, have a fuel problem, and he could have run out of petrol.
And that is De Cesaris' car. But De Cesaris would have taken the lead when Pironi. So that means to say that Derek Daly can win this race. Patrese could win. Now, if he push-started, he will be disqualified. Well, De Cesaris outed. Patrese could win still. Patrese got through. He restarted. You heard me say that he'd gone through. And Patrese is still ahead of Derek Daly, or was. And now, there is Derek Daly coasting to a standstill. This is unbelievable.
Well, we've got this ridiculous situation. We're all sitting by the start-finish line waiting for a winner to come past, and we don't seem to be getting one.
Then, at the race after in Detroit, he would make it back-to-back podiums with a third place. At the Canadian Grand Prix, Pironi took his first pole position for the Ferrari team, which he dedicated to his fallen teammate at the track which is named after him. But at the start of the race, he would stall, and a young driver called Riccardo Paletti would crash into the back of him. Pironi would go and check on him, but the car would set on fire. Paletti would eventually be freed from the fire, but would die later that day at the Royal Victoria Hospital.
Out of the Ferrari now, going over to the stricken Azella. It's Riccardo Paletti's car. Pironi tearing the bodywork off. Paletti still in the car as the marshals go to his aid. Paletti has hit the back of Pironi's Ferrari very hard. You see Pironi on the right taking his crash helmet off. Pironi quite unhurt. But Riccardo Paletti, the young Italian in the Azella team, and the car's on fire. The car has burst into flames. Of course, it's absolutely full of fuel because at the start of the race, the tank's absolutely full. And although these are safety tanks, the impact of Paletti's car when it hit the back of Pironi's obviously has ruptured the tanks. There's petrol on the road. The marshals there, you see Pironi in the red. Pironi is in there too. Pironi running round the car, getting another fire extinguisher. Everybody now working on this car, and Riccardo Paletti is still inside. The fuel, the burning fuel all over the road. Clearly, of course, the race will be stopped as the marshals and the track workers try to battle with this fire.
For the Netherlands Grand Prix, Ferrari decided to run two cars for the first time since Villeneuve's death, with Patrick Tambay joining the team after being dropped by Ligier the previous year and not racing to that point during the 1982 season. Pironi would win the Dutch Grand Prix after dominating.
Look at the battle for first. Alain Prost, who led the World Championship for some time this year, and now Pironi is going to try and take him as they come down to Tarzan, and he's through. Pironi takes the lead. Well, the man who won at San Marino, Didier Pironi, number 28 in the Ferrari, and who was second at Monaco, third in Detroit, now leads, as many people expected, the Dutch Grand Prix, and we wonder whether the Renaults will suffer from reliability problems. Here's a replay, and you see Pironi come out of the slipstream, much better on braking than the Renault, significantly. Takes the right line at the 90-mile-an-hour Tarzan bend, and now it looks to me as though he is already pulling away, and that Alain Prost can do little about it. So, Turbo Ferrari mechanics, Didier Pironi has won his second Grand Prix of 1982, having won at San Marino, and he's now into second place in the World Championship, 1 point behind John Watson, but Rosberg, who is therefore in third position. So, the Dutch Grand Prix ends with the second win for Didier Pironi this year, with Nelson Piquet in second place, Keke Rosberg third.
And 2 weeks later, he would finish second at the British Grand Prix. And despite everything, Pironi, for the first time in his career, was now leading the championship by 5 points from John Watson. Despite Pironi's on-track career hitting new heights, his life off the track was not going well. Not only was he dealing with the loss of Gilles Villeneuve and Riccardo Paletti, but also his marriage was now breaking down. Just 3 months after it started, they got a divorce. Pironi was now fully focused on the championship and driving like a champion, not risking the big move, instead going to take good points, finishing 3rd at his home race in France. 13 weeks to the day of Villeneuve's fatal crash, Pironi would go fastest in a dry practice session, but qualifying was very wet. Pironi went out to test a wet setup as Ferrari thought the race could also be a wet one. Pironi was testing the setup when he saw Derek Daly moving slowly ahead and getting out of his way, although he wasn't getting out of his way. Daly didn't actually know Pironi was there at all, and he was moving aside to pass an even slower Alain Prost. Pironi would crash into the back of Prost's car and the Ferrari was launched 30 metres into the air. Nelson Piquet would be the first to arrive to the scene of the crash and ran over to help Pironi, who was screaming for help, and Piquet saw a bone coming out of his leg. Pironi was alive but had suffered multiple fractures to his legs. There was thought that he would need both legs amputated there and then, but Professor Sid Watkins promised the pleading Pironi that would not be needed. It took 25 minutes to free Pironi from the Ferrari, and he was flown to a nearby hospital. Whilst in the hospital, Pironi insisted that Ferrari was a race that weekend, and Tambay took his first ever win. 5 days after the crash and after many surgeries, circulation returned to the legs of Didier Pironi, and he stated there and then his intentions to return to Formula 1 as soon as possible. A couple weeks after his crash, he would move to a hospital in Paris. He didn't know it at the time, but he would stay here for 3 months, as some of the bones in his legs were built up piece by piece during long, painful surgeries. Whilst in this hospital, he would receive frequent phone calls from Enzo Ferrari, who promised him his seat back once he was fit. Also in hospital, he couldn't help but keep an eye on the world of Formula 1. What had been a 16-point lead over Keke Rosberg became a 12-point lead at the German Grand Prix, then a 6-point lead at the Austrian Grand Prix, and ultimately a 3-point deficit after the Swiss Grand Prix, which would be the only race Rosberg would win that year. And by the end of the season, Pironi would find himself joint second with John Watson and Rosberg, the world champion, by just 5 points. Meaning that if the crash hadn't happened, Pironi would only have had to score 1 point in each of the remaining 5 races to become world champion. Enzo Ferrari would send his son Piero to visit Didier and gave him a sculpture of a prancing horse with to Didier, the true 1982 world champion, inscribed on the base. Pironi would be discharged from hospital on the 3rd of December. It would take another 6 months of painful physiotherapy before he was able to put his full weight back on his right foot. He would make his return to the paddock on crutches exactly 1 year to the day of his accident at the 1983 German Grand Prix, where he would be interviewed by Murray Walker.
First of all, welcome back to the Grand Prix scene. It's a wonderful sight to see you again. How are you?
I am very well. I just had my last operation 2 months ago, and I am waiting now to have a strong right leg, and I hope to push on the brake pedal in 2 or 3 months maximum.
Well, that's wonderful news. Didier, it's been a long and terrible 12 months for you. What exactly has happened in that 12 months to you?
Well, a lot of things. All my life changed, and when you have this sort of problem, you see the life with another eye, and everything changed for me, and it's much more interesting now and much nicer now.
The last time I saw you, you were in a terrible mess. How many operations have you had in the last 12 months?
Well, I don't know exactly, but something like 30 operation and 35 or 37 anesthesia, complete anesthesia.
Now you are here on crutches, but how mobile are you? Can you walk without crutches yet?
No, not yet, because I can't put all my weight on the right leg yet, but it's coming slowly, we just have to wait for 1 or 2 months and to walk without clutches.
Well, this time last year you were leading the World Championship. So many people want to see you there again. When do you hope to start driving again?
Well, it's difficult to say. I will start when I will be ready to start, but one thing is sure is if I come back, I will come back with the motivation to win the World Championship. That's my only motivation. And to win the World Championship, I have to be 100% of me. I have to have absolutely no problem to drive. So I will decide later if I am able to do that or not.
And will that be in a Ferrari?
I hope so. I would like very much. My choice is still the same. What I want is to be in the team who can offer me the most chances to be world champion, and that is still Ferrari.
In reality, he would not walk without crutches again until 1986, 3 years later. In the summer of 1984, he would meet up again with Catherine Gose and restart their relationship after it had previously broken down whilst Pironi was competing in Formula Renault. Pironi would get another taste of Formula 1 in the summer of 1985. His times had been competitive, but he could not ignore the pain that the G-force put on his legs. It had become clear to Pironi that his aim of returning to Formula 1 would not be achievable. He would still, however, have the need for competition and would move his vision from Formula 1 to the world of offshore powerboat racing. And in 1986, he made an entirely French team to compete in the Offshore World Championship. And he would prove very competitive, getting his first ever win in the 1987 Norway race.
Boat number 4 is Colibri, the boat that Pironi designed himself. And so to the start itself. As ever, the boat's lining up behind the start boat, behind the transom, that's the rear of the start boat. But Pironi going straight out into the lead here in Norway with Colibri.
Around the same time, he would find out that Catherine was pregnant and he was to become a father. This was when he would go to the Needles offshore race. Whilst leading the race, Pironi hit a large wash created by a tanker. His boat would fly 20 feet in the air, flipping upside down and crashing into the sea at an estimated speed of 90 miles per hour. This crash would kill Pironi and the 2 other crew members on board. It would later be determined that Pironi had survived the crash but then drowned, whereas the 2 crew members had died due to brain injuries. 7 months after Didier's death, Catherine gave birth to twins and called them Didier and Gilles. France would get its first world champion in 1985 when Alain Prost won the title. He would win the title 4 times and to this day is still the only French world champion. "12 years later, the son of Gilles Villeneuve, Jacques Villeneuve, would fulfill his father's legacy and become the 1997 world champion. Three years after that, Ferrari would finally go back to the top of the Drivers' Championship when Michael Schumacher would become the 2000 world champion. 21 long years after Ferrari's last world champion, Jody Scheckter.
And now, let the celebrations begin!
But there will be one more podium for Pironi. Gilles Pironi, who would take to the podium at the 2020 British Grand Prix while working as a reliability engineer for the Mercedes team. And in 2022, he would move to his father's former team of Ferrari and be part of their endurance racing cars team, where he would be part of the team that would win the 24 Hours of Le Mans in 2023, 45 years after his father won the same race for Renault.